Her hand flew to her mouth, a pathetic attempt to stifle the gasp that clawed its way up her throat. The opulent, art-filled hallway of their city loft, usually a testament to Marcus's impeccable taste and their shared future, suddenly felt like a spinning vortex, the designer sconces blurring into streaks of mocking light. Marcus's voice, usually a rich baritone that could melt her resolve with a single word, now drifted from the partially open study door, casual, cruel, and utterly alien. It was a sound that didn't just prick her ears, it plunged an icicle straight into her heart, stealing the very breath from her lungs. She's perfect for the role, though. Utterly clueless. Marcus's voice, now laced with a chilling amusement she'd never heard directed at her, confirmed Elara's burgeoning, horrifying nightmare. The sound of Liam, his best man and oldest friend, chuckling in response was like a hammer blow to her already fracturing composure. Rooted to the spot, Elara felt the plush silk of her robe, the one Marcus had bought her on their trip to Milan, turn clammy against her skin. Just moments ago she'd been tracing the delicate outline of her barely there baby bump, a giddy, secret joy bubbling within her. Now that joy was a curdled, bitter thing in her stomach. "Clueless is good, man," Liam slurred slightly, the clink of ice against glass punctuating his words. "Keeps things uncomplicated. You sure you want to go through with the whole till death do us part charade? I thought you'd have bailed by now, found some loophole." Marcus laughed again, a low, predatory rumble that made Elara's insides churn. "Are you kidding? This is prime. The wedding, the optics, it's all part of the brand. Elara plays the adoring fiancé to perfection. Sweet, devoted, and as you so astutely pointed out, completely oblivious to reality." He paused, and Elara could almost hear the smug smirk in his voice. "She's the ideal trophy wife, wouldn't you say? Beautiful, well-connected enough to be an asset, but not so sharp she starts asking inconvenient questions. Makes me look damn good. Stable, committed. Trophy wife." The words echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of Elara's mind. Was that all she was to him? A pretty accessory? An asset? The years they'd spent together, the laughter, the whispered promises under starlit skies, the future she'd so meticulously built around him. Was it all a performance for him too? A carefully curated illusion for public consumption? Her breath hitched, a ragged, painful sound in the stillness. Her pulse hammered a frantic, violent rhythm against her ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. Liam whistled, a low, appreciative sound. "Damn, Marcus, cold, but I get it. So the little bird has no idea about Zara?" Zara. Elara's blood turned to ice. Zara. Her maid of honor, her confidant. The woman who'd held her hand through countless late-night crises, who'd shrieked with joy when Marcus proposed, who just hours ago had been gushing over Elara's wedding dress, telling her how Marcus was going to lose his mind. The betrayal. A monstrous, two-headed serpent, uncoiled in her chest, its fangs dripping with a venom that paralyzed her. She stopped breathing altogether, the world narrowing to the sliver of golden light escaping the study, a beacon illuminating her personal hell. There was a beat of loaded silence, heavy enough to suffocate. Then Marcus exhaled, a low, dismissive laugh that scraped Elara's nerves raw. "Please, Zara is an entirely different kind of asset. If Elara ever found out about her, about us, she'd shatter like a cheap porcelain doll. The woman practically worships the ground I walk on. It's almost too easy. Pathetically so sometimes. Porcelain doll, fragile, breakable, empty." The image seared itself onto her brain. Her nails dug into the cool, polished wood of the doorframe, the pain a distant anchor in the maelstrom of her emotions. She could taste the metallic tang of blood where she'd bitten the inside of her cheek. "So how long has that been going on with Zara?" Liam's voice was laced with a prurient curiosity that made Elara's stomach roil with nausea. "Since the gallery opening, or before?" Marcus swirled his drink. The clinking of ice against glass was an unnervingly casual sound in the otherwise silent loft. "A few months now. Started as a bit of fun, some stress relief after that disastrous merger attempt. A couple of drinks, one thing led to another." He let out another dark, almost predatory chuckle that made Elara's skin crawl. "Man, Zara, she's addictive, knows what a man wants, no strings, no fuss, just pure, unadulterated pleasure. Not like Elara, with all her sensitivities." Sensitivities? Was that what he called her love, her trust, her unwavering belief in him? Elara felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Zara, who had sat with her for hours helping her choose floral arrangements, bridesmaid dresses, even the damn wedding vows. Zara, who had looked her in the eye and sworn that Marcus was the luckiest man alive. Had it all been a lie? Every shared secret, every supportive hug, every knowing smile? The depth of the deception was unfathomable, a gaping abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. How many times had Zara reported back to Marcus, laughing at Elara's naive pronouncements of love? How many times had they mocked her together? The thought was a physical blow, knocking the remaining air from her lungs. But Marcus wasn't finished twisting the knife. He leaned back, the creak of his expensive leather office chair reaching Elara even through the partially closed door, stretching languidly as if discussing something as mundane as quarterly earnings. And the beauty of it is, after the wedding, once she's legally Mrs. Thorne, I'll get her to sign the prenup. Frame it as being for us, some bullshit about financial security, protecting our future together. She'll lap it up. She trusts me completely. He actually grinned then. A sound sharp and cruel that sliced through Elara's remaining defenses. And then, when I eventually get bored or when someone more exciting comes along, I'll just move on. Clean break, generous settlement, of course. I'm not a monster. Not a monster. Elara thought, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her chest, dangerously close to escaping. You're the devil himself, cloaked in a bespoke suit. Damn, Marcus. That's efficient, Liam finally said. A note of something? Admiration? Or was it fear in his voice? Marcus shrugged dismissively, his tone bored now, as if the thrill of his confession was wearing off. Marriage is just another business deal, Liam, and Elara, she's an investment, a very beautiful, very naive, and soon-to-be very secure investment. Elara didn't know how she made it back to their bedroom. Her legs moved on autopilot, carrying her away from that locus of pain, that confessional of cruelty. The moment the heavy bedroom door clicked shut behind her, a sound of terrifying finality, her legs buckled. She collapsed onto the cold, polished hardwood floor, her back pressed against the unyielding wood, the luxurious Persian rug a few feet away, feeling like a distant, mocking reminder of the life she thought she had. Her hands, trembling uncontrollably, flew to cover her mouth, desperate to muffle the raw, guttural sobs that began to rack her body. They weren't delicate, weeping sounds. They were torn from the very depths of her soul, ragged and animalistic. Her body shook violently, the crushing weight of what she had just heard threatening to suffocate her, to literally stop her heart. Heartbreak wasn't a strong enough word. This was annihilation, soul deep. Marcus, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being, the man she had trusted implicitly, the man to whom she had given everything, her heart, her body, her dreams, her future. He had played her. Not just played her, but orchestrated her role in his grand, cynical play with meticulous, chilling precision. And Zara, whom she had loved like a sister, her closest confidant, the woman who was supposed to stand beside her tomorrow as her maid of honor, had been sleeping with him, laughing with him, deceiving her with him. The betrayal was a suffocating blanket, a toxic miasma filling her lungs. Her hands shook as she eventually, agonizingly, pushed herself up, gripping the cool, smooth edge of the marble-topped dresser for support. A reflection stared back at her from the ornate antique mirror Marcus had bought her, a pale, wild-eyed stranger with tear tracks etching paths through her carefully applied makeup from earlier that evening. Trophy wife, completely clueless, porcelain doll. His words, his labels, flayed her raw. She thought of every single moment she had shared with him, every laugh that now felt like a carefully rehearsed soundbite, every kiss that now tasted of ashes and lies, every time she had clung to him, believing he was her safe harbor, her rock, only to discover he was the storm itself. Every time she had defended his late nights at the office, brushed off his occasional emotional distance as work stress, telling herself, again and again, that the love they shared was undeniably real, a fortress against the world. What a fool she'd been. What an utter, blind, trusting fool. And Zara. Oh God, Zara. The memory of Zara, just last week, sitting on this very bed, sipping champagne, gushing about how Elara had snagged the ultimate prize in Marcus, how incredibly lucky she was. It felt utterly surreal. Like some twisted, cruel nightmare from which she would surely wake up, gasping for breath, heart pounding. But no matter how many times she silently begged the universe to rewind time, to transport her back to just those few blissful, ignorant moments before she'd walked past that study door, nothing changed. The reality was a brutal, unyielding wall. Her stomach twisted painfully again, a fresh wave of nausea rising in her throat. But this time, she forced herself to swallow it down, hard. She couldn't afford to be weak. Not now. Not anymore. She curled in on herself for a moment, arms wrapping protectively around her abdomen, around their child, her child. A fresh wave of volatile emotions surged through her, white-hot, unadulterated rage, then a paralyzing, bone-chilling fear, followed by a shattering, world-ending heartbreak, all tangled together in a suffocating, unbearable knot. What kind of monstrous man did this? What kind of potential father could smile at her, kiss her tenderly, talk excitedly about their shared future, all while secretly planning to betray her, to discard her, the moment she was legally bound to him? And Zara, how many times had she sat across from Elara, meticulously planning wedding details, her eyes sparkling with feigned excitement for the big day? How many times had she reassured Elara that Marcus adored her, that Elara was the luckiest woman alive? Had she been laughing behind her back the entire time? Had she whispered gleeful updates to Marcus after every carefully orchestrated phone call, mocking Elara for being so hopelessly naive, so blindly trusting? The sheer, calculated cruelty of it all was breathtaking. Elara clenched her jaw, wiping her wet cheeks furiously with the back of her hand. Her first instinct, primal and raw, was to flee. Pack a bag. Disappear before the sun even rose. She had enough savings. She could book a last-minute flight to anywhere, vanish into a new city, a new life, start over, raise her baby alone, far, far away from their toxic lies and their web of deception. Yes, that was it. Run. Escape. But then, Marcus's voice, laced with that insufferable, arrogant certainty, echoed in her mind. If she ever found out, she'd shatter like a cheap porcelain doll. Porcelain doll? Fragile, weak, breakable. Something inside Elara, something deep and resilient she hadn't known she possessed, coiled tight. Her entire body tensed, her fingers digging into the soft silk of her robe until her knuckles were white. Her breathing, once ragged and panicked, began to even out, becoming slow, deliberate, measured. A locket, a delicate gold heart Marcus had given her on their first anniversary, lay nestled against her skin. It was inscribed with tiny, almost invisible letters. My forever. The irony was a burning coal against her chest. She reached up, her fingers closing around the cold metal. It wasn't a comfort. It was a shackle. A reminder. No, she wouldn't break. She wouldn't run away like some scorned, weeping woman, sobbing in a lonely hotel room in a city where no one knew her name. She wouldn't hand Marcus that satisfaction, that easy victory. He wanted a show? He thought she was merely a player in his grand design? Fine. She would give him his wedding. She would give him the perfect, beautiful, storybook ceremony he so clearly thought he was entitled to. And then, right when he felt most triumphant, most secure, when all his society friends and business cronies were watching, she would burn his entire meticulously crafted world to the ground. Ashes. He had used her, lied to her, planned to humiliate and discard her. Now it was her turn. Her reflection stared back, no longer a shattered doll, but a woman with eyes like chips of obsidian, a silent, terrible vow forming on her lips, a whisper that promised a storm. No, I won't shatter. I'll make him break. The woman staring back from the antique mirror was a stranger. Gone was the soft, hopeful Elara, the bride-to-be lost in dreams of lace and forever. In her place stood a figure carved from ice, her eyes chips of obsidian, reflecting the dim bedroom light with a dangerous, predatory gleam. Marcus's sneering dismissal, his casual cruelty, had done more than break her heart. It had forged something new in its wreckage. Her lips, pale and set, moved, a silent vow forming in the stillness of the opulent loft, a promise that tasted of ashes and iron. You want a show, Marcus? A spectacle? Oh, I'll give you one you and everyone you've ever known will never, ever forget. Fleeing was an option, wasn't it? A tempting whisper of escape that slithered through the chaos of her thoughts. Pack a bag, disappear into the anonymity of a new city, a new life, raise her child far from the poisonous tendrils of Marcus Thorne and his web of deceit. For a fleeting moment the image was almost seductive, a quiet existence, a peaceful anonymity, a chance to heal. But then Marcus's arrogant voice, so clear, so condescending, echoed in the chambers of her mind. She'd break like a cheap porcelain doll, and something within Elara didn't just snap. It obliterated. No, running was his victory, not hers. Running meant he was right, that she was fragile, easily discarded, a footnote in his grand selfish narrative. The primal urge to run, to hide, warred violently with a newer, colder, and far more potent emotion, the burning, unholy need for justice. Or was it revenge? Did the distinction even matter anymore when her entire world had been built on lies? Could you even call it revenge when you were simply exposing the truth they so desperately tried to hide? These questions circled her mind like vultures. She dismissed the idea of disappearing. Vanishing would be an admission of defeat. He would smirk, tell his cronies she'd predictably shattered, and move on to his next conquest, his next investment, without a backward glance. The very thought fueled the icy fire in her veins. He wouldn't get away with it. Not this time. Not with her. But how? How could one woman, a woman he'd so thoroughly underestimated, dismantle an empire built on charm and ruthlessness? What leverage did she truly have beyond the devastating truth? She needed help. Someone who knew Marcus, knew his world, his pressure points, his vulnerabilities. Someone who wasn't already bought and paid for, blinded by his charisma, or terrified of his influence. Her mind raced, sifting through the faces of their acquaintances, their supposed friends. Most were sycophants, hangers-on, orbiting Marcus's dazzling success like moths to a flame. They wouldn't dare cross him. Zara, the name was a fresh stab of pain, her best friend, her sister in all but blood. How could she have been so blind? Then a name surfaced through the fog of her anger and pain, faint at first, then gaining clarity. Rhys. Marcus's younger brother. The quiet one, the observant one, the artist in a family of corporate sharks. Rhys, who always seemed to be on the periphery, his eyes holding a knowing, almost melancholic understanding that Elara had never quite deciphered. He was different. She remembered a particular family dinner, a sprawling, ostentatious affair at the Thorne family estate. Marcus had been holding court, pontificating about some soulless business acquisition, and had casually dismissed Elara's opinion on a local art initiative she was passionate about. He'd waved his hand, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "Darling, stick to planning parties. Leave the real world to me." The table had tittered, eager to please the heir apparent. But Rhys, seated across from her, had met her gaze, a flicker of something, empathy, distaste for his brother's arrogance, in his usually guarded expression. He'd then smoothly, almost imperceptibly, steered the conversation, subtly validating her point about community engagement with a quiet comment about a similar successful project in another city. Marcus had scowled, but couldn't refute it. Rhys had given Elara a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement, a shared moment of understanding in a room full of pretense. Could he be the unlikely ally she so desperately needed? Or was he just another thorn, cut from the same duplicitous cloth? The risk was enormous. If he betrayed her too, but what other choice did she have? To do nothing was to let Marcus win. And that, she realized with a jolt of pure unadulterated resolve, was simply not an option. Her fingers, surprisingly steady now, scrolled through her contacts. Rhys Thorne. She'd never called him this late before. Never really called him much at all, their interactions usually confined to polite exchanges at family gatherings or Marcus's ostentatious parties. But tonight, everything was irrevocably, terrifyingly different. Her thumb hovered over his name, a lifetime of doubt and fear crammed into that single suspended second. Then, she pressed call. Each ring echoed in the tomb-like silence of the bedroom, amplifying her racing heartbeat. 1 ring. 2. Would he even answer? 3. Elara? A groggy, sleep-filled voice, but unmistakably Rhys. Then an instant shift, a sharpening of tone, concern lacing his words. "Elara, what's wrong? It's the middle of the night." She opened her mouth, but no sound came. The lump in her throat, the one she'd been battling, was back, thick and suffocating. For a terrifying moment, she thought she wouldn't be able to speak at all, the words trapped behind a wall of unshed tears and raw fury. Could she trust him? Could she trust anyone ever again? Rhys must have sensed her distress, her silent, fractured panic. "Hey," he said, his voice softening, surprisingly patient. "Take a deep breath. Talk to me. What's going on?" His voice wasn't demanding. It wasn't intrusive. It was a lifeline. Elara squeezed her eyes shut, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead as if to physically hold her splintering thoughts together. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was barely above a ragged whisper, a broken thing. "Rhys, I need you. Now. Please." There was only the briefest of pauses on the other end, a silence so profound Elara thought he might hang up, dismiss her as hysterical. But then, his voice calm and unwavering cut through her fear. "Where are you, Elara?" "Home." The loft. Her voice cracked on the word home. It wasn't a home. It was a gilded cage, a beautifully decorated stage for Marcus's deceptions. "Okay, don't move. Don't do anything," Rhys said, his tone firm but reassuring. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. No hesitation, no prying questions, just quiet, unwavering certainty." Elara pulled the phone away from her ear, staring down at the screen until the call disconnected, the city lights painting shifting patterns on its dark surface. 10 minutes. Her hands still trembled, but this time it wasn't just from grief or shock. It was from something else entirely. Something much colder, much sharper. A dangerous, nascent flicker of strength. She had made a decision. She had reached out. The game, whatever terrifying form it might take, was on. The 24-hour diner, a relic of chrome and cracked vinyl booths smelling faintly of stale coffee and desperation, was nearly deserted at this ungodly pre-dawn hour. A couple of weary truckers hunched over greasy plates, their faces illuminated by the harsh, fluorescent glow. Elara sat crammed into a booth in the furthest, darkest corner, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of lukewarm, untouched tea. Her leg bounced uncontrollably under the formica table, a nervous rhythm betraying the calm, almost unnervingly composed facade she was desperately trying to maintain. Breathe. Stay calm. Keep it together. The mantra replayed in her head, a fragile shield against the tidal wave of emotions still threatening to drown her. The moment she saw Rhys push through the diner's smudged glass door, his shoulders hunched slightly against the pre-dawn chill, his dark hair disheveled as if he'd thrown on the first clothes he could find. Dark jeans, a plain gray hoodie. Everything inside her, that had been precariously held together, threatened to shatter anew. He scanned the diner, his usually guarded expression etched with concern, and when his intense, dark eyes found hers across the room, all traces of sleepiness vanished, replaced by an unnerving focus that made her breath catch. He wasn't Marcus. He never had been. Where Marcus was polished, sharp-edged, perpetually calculated, Rhys possessed a different kind of presence. Steady, watchful, a quiet storm brewing just beneath the surface. Right now that storm looked dangerously close to breaking. He slid into the seat opposite her without a word, his gaze sweeping over her face, taking in the red-rimmed eyes, the slight tremor in her fingers as she finally set the teacup down with a clatter. "Tell me everything, Elara," he said, his voice low but firm, demanding the truth. No preamble, no small talk, just a direct, unwavering command. Elara swallowed, the lump returning to her throat. She hadn't allowed herself to cry again since those initial soul-shattering sobs had racked her body in the cold emptiness of her bedroom. She had fiercely, desperately told herself she wouldn't shed another tear for Marcus Thorne. But now, sitting across from Rhys, someone whose concern felt so palpably genuine, someone who wasn't feeding her a carefully constructed narrative of lies. Something inside her threatened to give way. She exhaled shakily, her fingers gripping the sticky edge of the table. And then the words came, tumbling out in a painful, disjointed rush, a torrent of betrayal and heartbreak. "I heard him, Rhys," she whispered, the words raw, scraped from her soul. "Marcus, he was in his study, talking to Liam." Rhys's jaw tightened perceptibly, a muscle twitching just beneath the skin. His hands, resting on the tabletop, curled into tight fists. He didn't speak, just held her gaze, his eyes dark pools of controlled fury. He doesn't love me, Rhys." The admission, spoken aloud, was another fresh wound. "He never did. I was just a trophy to him, a prop for his image, a naive investment." A bitter, shaky laugh escaped her, sounding foreign even to her own ears. "And Zara, it's been Zara all along, my best friend, my maid of honor." She choked on the words. He bragged about it, Rhys, like it was some conquest, some sick joke. He called her addictive. Rhys's expression darkened further, the lines around his mouth hardening into a grim mask. He muttered something harsh under his breath. A curse Elara didn't quite catch, but whose sentiment she understood completely. Her fingernails dug into her palms, pressing hard into the soft skin. the small pain a welcome distraction. And after the wedding, he planned to make me sign a prenup, make me think it was for us. Then when he got bored, he was just going to leave me, discard me. She finally looked up, meeting his furious gaze. He called me a porcelain doll, Rhys. Said I'd shatter if I ever found out. Rhys sucked in a sharp, audible breath, leaning back slightly in the booth. His fists clenched and unclenched rhythmically, as if he were physically struggling to restrain himself from punching the nearest wall. Or perhaps his brother. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight, vibrating with a barely restrained rage that was almost frightening in its intensity. I always knew Marcus was a selfish, arrogant bastard, Elara, he muttered, shaking his head slowly, disgust etched onto every line of his face. He's hurt people before. Badly. I remember what he did to old Mr. Henderson, drove his small publishing house into the ground with a predatory buyout, then laughed about it over cigars with Dad. Called it good business. Rhys's eyes flashed with a long-held resentment. But this, what he's done to you, this is something else entirely. This is monstrous. He exhaled slowly, deliberately, as if trying to regain control. And Zara, are you absolutely sure about Zara? Elara let out a hollow, mirthless laugh. Oh, he made it crystal clear. Apparently, she's addictive. His word, not mine. The word felt sour, vile on her tongue. Rhys looked away for a second, running a hand distractedly through his already messy hair, trying to process the sheer scale of the deception. The air in the diner crackled with unspoken things. Then, when his intense eyes met hers again, his expression had softened almost imperceptibly. What are you going to do, Elara? He asked quietly, his voice losing some of its hard edge. She inhaled deeply, feeling a flicker of that icy resolve she'd found in the reflection of her mirror reignite within her, fanned by Rhys's palpable anger on her behalf. I thought about running, she admitted honestly, her voice gaining a surprising strength. Just packing a bag, leaving before the sham of a wedding, disappearing somewhere he could never find me, raise my baby in peace. Rhys studied her, his gaze unwavering, searching. But then I thought about how he sees me, she continued, her voice hardening, the earlier vulnerability replaced by a steely determination. A porcelain doll, something fragile, easily breakable. He actually thinks I'll just shatter the second I find out the truth. Her eyes met his, fierce and determined. I'm not running, Rhys. I'm not letting him win. Not this time. I'm not going to be the weeping victim he expects. Rhys's jaw twitched again, a silent testament to his own rising anger, an anger that mirrored her own. Elara sat up straighter, the fire inside her, banked for so long by shock and grief, now burning hotter, brighter. I want to make him pay, Rhys, she said, her voice low, intense. I want him to feel exactly what it's like to have his whole perfect, curated world spectacularly collapse right in front of his face, in front of everyone he cares about, impressing. A slow, almost dangerous smirk tugged at the corner of Rhys's lips, though his eyes remained deadly serious. He leaned forward, his forearms resting on the grimy tabletop. So you want revenge? Elara didn't hesitate for a nanosecond. Yes. The word was a release, a commitment. Rhys nodded slowly, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm against the formica. His mind was clearly working, piecing things together, formulating a strategy. He didn't try to talk her out of it. He didn't offer platitudes about how revenge wasn't worth it, how she should just take the high road and be the bigger person. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a chillingly focused intensity. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice a low, conspiratorial rumble that sent shivers down her spine, not of fear this time, but of a strange, potent excitement. Then let's make it count, Elara. Let's make it a masterpiece. She blinked, surprised by the ferocity, the readiness in his tone. You'll help me? Rhys's expression hardened into resolute determination, his eyes glinting with a sharp, almost predatory light. Of course I am. Did you really think I was going to just stand by and let him get away with this? With what he did to Mr. Henderson? With what he's doing to you? He scoffed, a sound laced with years of bitterness. Marcus has spent his entire damn life stepping on people, manipulating situations, thinking he's completely untouchable. He needs to learn that actions have consequences, especially these actions. A strange, potent mix of overwhelming relief and profound gratitude washed over Elara. She hadn't realized just how desperately she needed someone to believe her. to validate her anger, to stand with her, to affirm that she wasn't crazy for wanting to destroy the man who had so callously and completely destroyed her first. This was no longer just her fight. It was theirs, an alliance forged in betrayal and a shared desire for retribution. Rhys cracked his knuckles, a sharp, decisive sound in the quiet diner. "Okay," he said, his voice now crisp and businesslike. "Tell me what you're thinking. What's the outline of this revenge plan?" Elara took another deep, fortifying breath. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but now it was overlaid with a thrilling, dangerous sense of purpose. "We let him believe nothing is wrong," she began, her voice steadier than she'd thought possible. "I play the part. I act hurt, confused perhaps, but ultimately forgiving. The heartbroken woman who loves him too much to actually walk away. I let him think I'm still completely under his spell, still his naive little porcelain doll, too fragile to fight back." Rhys nodded slowly, absorbing the strategy, his eyes never leaving hers. "And while he's busy congratulating himself on being such a smug, untouchable bastard, I gather the evidence," Elara finished, meeting his intense gaze, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and fierce, exhilarating resolve. "Messages, photos, maybe even recordings, whatever concrete proof I can find. We make absolutely sure there's no way he can possibly talk his way out of it. No room for denial. No escape." "And then," Rhys prompted, leaning even closer, the air between them thick with unspoken understanding and shared purpose. "And then," Elara said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with a chilling conviction that surprised even herself. "On the wedding day, right there at the altar, in front of everyone, his family, his precious business associates, all the society vultures, we expose him." Rhys leaned back slightly, a slow, deeply appreciative, and utterly dangerous grin finally spreading across his face. "Now that," he said, his eyes glinting with a satisfaction that mirrored her own, "sounds like a plan, Elara. A goddamn beautiful plan." He reached for his own now cold coffee, taking a long sip before setting the mug down with a decisive click. "He won't know what hit him. Are you ready for this, Elara?" She met his gaze, a sliver of the power she thought Marcus had stolen forever surging back through her veins. "More than ready, Rhys." The words were a vow, a secret pact sealed in the greasy pre-dawn light of a forgotten diner. More than ready. Leaving the diner, the city lights of Viridia seemed to blur around Elara, a chaotic smear of neon and shadow, yet one thing burned with a terrifying, exhilarating clarity. The game was on. She and Rhys, an alliance forged in the crucible of Marcus's treachery, were about to play for keeps. Her first, and perhaps most daunting task? Face the serpent in his den, play the part of the adoring fiancé, all while her heart was a shattered ruin within her chest. How does one smile at the architect of their own destruction? Waking the next day, or rather rising after a night of torment punctuated by fractured nightmarish dozes, Elara felt a chilling calm. The tears, the raw, guttural sobs that had ripped through her in the privacy of her bedroom, were gone. In their place, a glacial resolve had settled, cold and hard and utterly unyielding. The performance of her life was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If Marcus suspected, even for a moment, that his porcelain doll had discovered the cracks in his facade, their entire meticulously constructed final plan for his downfall would crumble. Could she do it? Could she look into the eyes of the man she'd loved, the man who had so casually annihilated her trust, and pretend that everything was perfect? The alternative, letting him win, was unthinkable. Marcus, oblivious and infuriatingly smug, finally strolled into their sprawling loft apartment later that afternoon. He looked, as always, like he'd stepped from the cover of a lifestyle magazine, slightly rumpled from his supposed late night with the boys after his bachelor party, but with that signature smirk firmly in place. Elara was in the kitchen, the vast marble island spread with an elaborate charcuterie board. A peace offering of sorts, or so she'd make it seem. Imported cheeses, paper-thin slices of prosciutto, glistening olives, a selection she knew he favored. Every detail was a carefully chosen prop in her elaborate play of deception. She heard his confident footsteps, his usual easy, entitled stride carrying him straight toward her. "Hey, beautiful," he murmured, his voice a low caress as he slid an arm possessively around her waist from behind, pressing a casual, unthinking kiss to the side of her neck. Elara steeled herself, allowing her body to remain pliant, fighting the involuntary shiver of revulsion that threatened to betray her. For only a fraction of a second did she falter, then, tilting her head back, she offered him a small, carefully crafted smile, soft, adoring, a masterpiece of acting. "Hey," she said softly, her voice intentionally breathy as if she had been eagerly awaiting his return all day. "Liar," her mind screamed. "Monster." Marcus grinned, squeezing her hip with a familiarity that now felt violating. "Miss me?" Her stomach churned, a nauseous cocktail of grief and rage. But she managed a quiet, convincing laugh, leaning back into his hold just enough to sell the illusion of the loving fiancé. "Of course, did you have fun last night? With Zara, perhaps? Or were you too busy plotting my financial ruin?" Marcus released her, turning to the sub-zero fridge to grab a bottle of sparkling water. "Yeah, it was wild. Liam got so wasted I seriously thought we were going to have to carry him back to his hotel room." He chuckled, a sound that now grated on Elara's nerves like nails on a chalkboard. Elara nodded, turning back to the charcuterie board, carefully slicing a wedge of aged cheddar. Her hands, remarkably, were perfectly steady. The glacial calm had permeated her very being. "Sounds like a good time," she murmured, her voice even. "Did you rehearse this alibi with Liam, or does deceit come so naturally to you both?" Marcus twisted the cap off his bottle and took a long sip. His eyes, those deceptively warm hazel eyes she'd once found so captivating, watching her movements. They were sharper today, she noted, a flicker of something analytical behind their usual lazy charm. "You okay?" he asked, his tone suddenly losing its casualness, becoming more focused. Elara blinked, feigning mild surprise, her heart giving a small, betraying thump. Was her mask slipping? "What do you mean, darling?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his gaze unnervingly direct, like he was trying to read something hidden deep within her, deciphering some subtle shift in her aura. It was a look she'd seen him use in business meetings, dismantling opponents with his unnerving scrutiny. For a horrifying second, she thought he knew that all their carefully laid plans were about to unravel. "I don't know," he said slowly, thoughtfully. "You just seem different, quieter." Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to pierce her composure. But she fought it down, summoning every ounce of her newfound strength. Elara's lips curled into a small, self-deprecating smile, the kind he always found endearing. "Well, I am getting married in less than a week, Marcus," she said, her voice a soft, breathy laugh. She even managed a playful roll of her eyes. "I'm pretty sure that's enough to make any woman act a little different, a little preoccupied, don't you think? All these last-minute details, everyone watching." She let her voice trail off, a perfect imitation of bridal nerves. Marcus chuckled, the sound seemingly relaxing him, the brief flicker of Marcus's suspicion in his eyes dimming. He walked up behind her again, his hands sliding possessively up her bare arms. His touch felt like ice, then fire. She had to force herself not to recoil. "Cold feet, babe?" he murmured against her hair. She turned within his hold, looking up at him, her expression carefully calibrated to be soft, almost shy, tinged with a believable vulnerability. "Maybe just a little," she admitted, letting her gaze drop demurely. "Not about you, of course, never about you. Oh, if only you knew the inferno of rage I feel when you touch me. Just everything. The wedding, all the guests, being the center of attention. It's a lot." It was a plausible performance, drawing on genuine anxieties any bride might feel, twisting them to serve her purpose. Marcus relaxed instantly, his grip on her loosening as his signature smug smirk returned. He was buying it. The arrogant fool. "Babe, you're going to be absolutely fine. Trust me." He leaned in, pressing a kiss to her forehead, a gesture that once would have made her melt. "The second you start walking down that aisle, looking like the goddess you are, none of that other stuff is even going to matter. All eyes will be on you, my perfect bride." Elara exhaled, a shaky but convincing sigh, nodding as if he had just spoken the exact words she needed to hear. "You're right," she whispered, forcing herself to melt into the touch, to let her body relax against his, playing the part of the reassured, adoring fiancé to perfection. It was a dangerous game of control, a high-stakes performance on a razor's edge, and she refused to falter, refused to lose. Every smile, every touch, every loving word was a carefully aimed dart, lulling him into a false sense of security. The final days leading up to the wedding were a blur of forced smiles and meticulously choreographed interactions. Elara played her role flawlessly, a grieving but devoted woman, slightly overwhelmed by the impending nuptials but utterly besotted with her groom. Marcus, for the most part, seemed to accept her performance. He was, after all, a man who believed in his own irresistible charm. Why wouldn't she be adoring? Yet to Elara's newly hyper-aware senses, the shift in his behavior, though subtle, was noticeable. Longer, more probing glances when he thought she wasn't looking. His arm lingering around her waist, just a fraction of a second too long, as if testing her reaction, her compliance. His voice at times was slightly more careful, more measured when he spoke to her, probing for any hint of suspicion, any crack in her facade. "You're really quiet today," he remarked suddenly one evening, as they sat in the opulent living room of their loft, supposedly reviewing the final seating chart for the reception. The city lights glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a backdrop of indifferent stars to their silent domestic drama. Elara glanced up from the society magazine she wasn't actually reading, feigning mild confusion. "Huh?" Marcus's eyes were fixed on her now, his expression unreadable, calculating. That unnerving focus was back. "You've just been different these past couple of days, lost in thought." Could he see through her? Was the strain of her deception finally showing? Elara managed another small, breathy laugh, shaking her head dismissively as she closed the magazine with a soft thud. "Have I? Oh, darling, I swear if I hear one more person mention wedding jitters, I think I'm going to actually lose my mind." She reached across the glass coffee table, taking his hand, her touch deliberately light, almost tentative. "It's a huge deal, Marcus. I'm about to become Mrs. Marcus Thorne, after all." She even managed to blush, looking down at their intertwined fingers, focusing on the unwanted pressure of his thumb brushing over her knuckles. His gaze softened, the suspicion momentarily receding. "I know you're not having second thoughts, are you, Elara?" he asked, his voice dropping slightly, a hint of something, concern, or perhaps just arrogant possessiveness creeping into his tone. Elara's chest tightened, a cold knot forming in her stomach, but her expression remained perfectly composed, a mask of loving devotion. She squeezed his hand lightly, looking up at him with just the right amount of manufactured vulnerability shining in her eyes. "Of course not, Marcus. Never. How could you even ask?" He held her gaze for a second longer, still searching, probing beneath the surface. Then, finally, he seemed satisfied, exhaling slowly and grinning, that familiar, predatory gleam returning to his eyes. "Good. Because once you say I do on Saturday, there's no backing out, you know." Elara smiled back, a secret, chilling promise hidden behind the soft adoration in her eyes. "Oh, if only you knew, Marcus. If only you knew whose world is truly about to end." And Riss was her shadow, her silent partner in this dangerous dance. A steady, grounding presence just on the periphery of the pre-wedding chaos. Always watchful, always supportive. Their secret communication was a lifeline. Late-night encrypted texts, their content chillingly practical. Z's cloud unsecured. Jackpot, sending file. R. Hotel receipt found. His alibi for the Cayman trip is shot. E. Hushed, brief phone calls. Elara often locked in the guest bathroom, her voice a mere whisper as they strategized their next move. "Did you manage to get anything on his conversation with his lawyer about the prenup?" He mentioned it to Liam. Quick, meaningful glances exchanged across crowded rooms during the endless rehearsal dinners and suffocating family gatherings. Marcus insisted they attend. It was strange, almost unsettling, how quickly she had come to rely on him, on his quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. His competence was a balm to her frayed nerves. He seemed to anticipate every need, every potential pitfall in their audacious final plan. He'd managed to secure screenshots of the vile text exchanges between Marcus and Zara, a digital testament to their shared treachery and their contempt for her. Reese, with his quiet tech savviness and network of less than scrupulous contacts, had even obtained a grainy but damning security photo of Marcus and Zara entering a boutique hotel on the Upper East Side, the very weekend Marcus had claimed to be at a vital business conference in Zurich. Elara herself had found the hotel receipt, tucked carelessly into the pocket of one of his expensive suits, its dates a screaming indictment of his lies. Each piece of gathering evidence was a nail in Marcus's coffin, and with each piece, Elara felt a sliver of her stolen power return. The pre-wedding tension was a palpable thing, a high-wire act performed without a net. One particularly heart-stopping evening, Elara had been using Marcus's unlocked laptop in his study, transferring a folder of damning financial irregularities Rhys had unearthed onto a virtually invisible micro USB drive. She'd heard his footsteps, heavier than usual, approaching the study. A frantic scramble, closing windows, ejecting the drive, shoving it into the tiny pocket of her jeans, and feigning deep absorption in a leather-bound volume of poetry she'd grabbed from his shelves. Marcus had paused in the doorway, his eyes narrowed with Marcus's suspicion. "Working late, darling?" he'd asked, his voice deceptively casual. She'd smiled, her heart hammering. "Just couldn't sleep. Thought some Keats might help." He'd watched her for a long moment, then, seemingly satisfied, had merely grunted and walked away. She'd almost collapsed with relief. Through it all, the Elara and Rhys's bond deepened, an unspoken emotional undercurrent flowing beneath their shared purpose. There were moments, a brush of hands as they exchanged a flash drive in a crowded cafe, a shared look of grim satisfaction when a particularly crucial piece of evidence fell into place that crackled with an unexpected, dangerous electricity. He saw her resilience, her icy determination, and a fierce protectiveness rose in him. She saw his unwavering loyalty, his quiet competence, his simmering disdain for his brother's callousness, and a tentative, fragile trust began to take root in the barren landscape of her heart. Could this be something more than an alliance? The thought was a dangerous whisper, one she ruthlessly suppressed. There was no room for anything but the mission. Rhys, in his digging, had also unearthed a rather unsavory detail about Zara's past. A string of bad debts and a previous, very messy affair with a married benefactor that had ended in a quiet but expensive settlement. It wasn't something Elara planned to use directly. Her focus was solely on Marcus and Zara's betrayal of her. But the knowledge added another layer to Zara's character, painting her not just as a treacherous friend, but as a woman capable of profound recklessness and moral compromise. It also strangely solidified the conspiratorial link between Elara and Rhys, another secret shared, another piece of the rotten puzzle they were assembling. The night before the wedding, the city outside thrummed with an indifferent energy, oblivious to the storm about to break. Elara and Rhys met one last time, not in a grimy diner, but in the quiet, anonymous sanctuary of a small, independent art gallery in a forgotten corner of the city, surrounded by canvases of abstract, turbulent emotion that seemed to mirror Elara's own inner state. The air was thick with pre-wedding tension, the finality of their final plan hanging heavy between them. Rhys handed her a sleek, encrypted flash drive. "Everything," he said, his voice low. The texts, the photos, the hotel bills, the audio of him with Liam, even a snippet of him discussing the prenup with his lawyer, very pleased with himself. "It's all there. Undeniable." His hand briefly covered hers as she took the drive, the cool metal a stark contrast to the sudden warmth of his touch. It lingered a fraction of a second too long. "Tomorrow," he said, his dark eyes locking onto hers, filled with a mixture of grim determination and something else, something deeper, more personal. "Tomorrow, it all comes crashing down." Elara nodded, her throat tight. A flicker of raw fear, primal and cold, warred with the fierce, almost savage anticipation that had become her constant companion. She clutched the flash drive, the instrument of her retribution, her liberation. "Let it burn," she whispered, the words of final, irrevocable commitment. There was a moment of charged silence, the unspoken thrumming between them, the dangerous attraction they'd both so carefully ignored. He leaned in, just slightly, his gaze dropping to her lips. She found herself leaning in too, drawn by an invisible current. An almost kiss, a breath held. Then, as if by mutual, unspoken agreement, they both pulled back, the necessity of their mission, the gravity of the impending day reasserting itself. The air crackled with what might have been, what could never be. Or could it? He cleared his throat. "Get some rest, Elara. You'll need your strength." She nodded again, unable to find her voice. As she walked out of the gallery and into the cool night air, the flash drive a solid, reassuring weight in her hand. One thought consumed her. Tomorrow, Marcus Thorne would learn that porcelain, when pushed too far, doesn't just shatter. It explodes. As Elara emerged from the shadows of the narthex, A collective gasp, soft yet audible, rippled through the ancient stones of St. Augustine's Cathedral. The transition from the dimly lit anteroom into the main sanctuary was like stepping from night into a sun-drenched dream. Or, perhaps, a meticulously staged nightmare. The cathedral doors, massive carved oak behemoths, had swung open with a silent, dramatic flourish, revealing Elara, a vision in ivory silk and Alençon lace, a veritable snow queen gliding towards an altar that would soon become a stage for the most public and personal of executions. This was it. The culmination of a week of silent screams, icy resolve, and a dangerous, thrilling pact. Was she ready? Oh, she was more than ready. She was born for this moment of reckoning. The air within the hallowed space was thick with the scent of 1,000 ivory roses and expensive eucalyptus, their fragrance mingling with the lingering aroma of beeswax polish and ancient incense. Sunlight, fractured into a kaleidoscope of jeweled colors by the towering stained-glass windows depicting stoic saints and biblical tragedies, danced across the polished marble floor, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny captive stars in the hallowed air. A string quartet, positioned discreetly in the choir loft, played a poignant, achingly beautiful melody by Bach, a melody Elara herself had chosen in what felt like another lifetime, a lifetime of blissful ignorance. The pews were filled with Viridia's elite, captains of industry, society mavens, old money and new, all dressed in their Sunday best, their faces turned towards her with expressions of admiration, anticipation, and perhaps, for the more cynical among them, a detached curiosity. This was, after all, the wedding of the year. Marcus Thorne, the golden boy, and Elara Ashton, the beautiful, accomplished architect who had, it seemed, captured his elusive heart. What a perfect picture they made, if only they knew. And there he stood, at the far end of the impossibly long aisle, by the flower-laden altar. Marcus. Her Marcus. Or rather, the man she had believed to be Marcus. He looked every inch the picture of a triumphant, conquering groom. His custom-made tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his dark hair styled with just the right amount of calculated, artful dishevelment. His signature confident smirk, the one that had once made her heart flutter and now made her stomach churn with revulsion, was firmly in place, tugging attractively at the corner of his perfectly sculpted lips. He radiated an aura of complete, unassailable ease, even winking subtly at a prominent business associate in the front pew, a man whose company Marcus was rumored to be acquiring through less than ethical means. Marcus was a man who had meticulously orchestrated every detail of his life, and by all appearances had achieved it all. He had absolutely no inkling, no premonition of the cataclysm about to be unleashed. His obliviousness was almost pitiable. Almost. Elara began her walk, her movements slow, deliberate, each step of the wedding ceremony measured and graceful. Her hand rested lightly on her father's arm, his dear, unsuspecting face a mask of proud paternal love. She could feel the weight of every single gaze upon her, hear the soft, hushed whispers rippling through the pews like a gentle, insidious wave. Stunning. Gorgeous. He's a lucky man. Lucky? Oh, he had no idea. Her own expression was a masterpiece of serene, bridal calm, utterly unreadable. She allowed a soft, almost shy smile to touch her lips as she met Marcus's gaze, his eyes devouring her, filled with possessive approval, like a collector admiring a priceless, newly acquired masterpiece. And that, she knew with a chilling certainty, was precisely what he thought she was. A prize. His prize. She let him believe it, just for these fleeting moments, as she glided closer, a sacrificial lamb approaching the slaughter. Or was she the executioner, cloaked in white? The delicious, savage irony of it all fueled the icy fire in her veins. The priest, Monsignor Davies, a portly man with a kind face and a voice like warm honey, cleared his throat, smiling warmly as Elara reached the altar and her father placed her hand in Marcus's. Marcus's grip was firm, proprietary, his thumb tracing slow, absent-minded circles on her skin. To anyone watching, it must have looked like an intimate, reassuring gesture of love and connection. To Elara, it felt like a cold chain tightening around her wrist, a symbol of his ownership, his intended control. It took every ounce of her willpower not to snatch her hand away. "Dearly beloved," Monsignor Davies began, his voice resonating through the silent cathedral, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God and in the face of this company to celebrate the sacred union of Marcus Anthony Thorne and Elara Beatrice Ashton. Elara barely registered the familiar words. Her heartbeat remained surprisingly steady, a calm, metronomic rhythm beneath the storm brewing inside. Her mind was sharp, laser-focused on what came next, on the flash drive Reese had discreetly passed to the wedding's AV technician. A young man Reese knew from his university days, someone eager to do a favor for the artistic Thorne brother, and perhaps stick it to the corporate one. She could feel Reese's presence somewhere behind her, standing quietly among the groomsmen, his energy a steady, watchful counterpoint to the coiling tension within her. Waiting. The priest turned to Marcus. Marcus Anthony, do you take this woman, Elara Beatrice, to be your lawfully wedded wife, to live together in the holy state of matrimony? Will you love her, comfort her, honor, and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep thee only unto her, so long as you both shall live? Marcus's voice was smooth, confident, unwavering, imbued with just the right amount of heartfelt sincerity. He gazed into Elara's eyes, a look of profound adoration expertly painted on his handsome face. I do. The words, so simple, so traditional, now sounded like a vile profanity to Elara's ears. Monsignor Davies then turned to her, his smile benign. And Elara Beatrice, do you take this man, Marcus Anthony, to be your lawfully wedded husband, to live together in the holy state of matrimony? Will you love him, comfort him, honor, and keep him in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep thee only unto him, so long as you both shall live? This was it. The moment. The precipice. Elara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she paused, a silence that stretched taut and electric through the cavernous cathedral. A ripple of confusion, a collective intake of breath, went through the shocked guests. Marcus's smile faltered, a tiny frown creasing his perfect brow. He squeezed her hand, a silent warning. She slowly, deliberately lifted her free hand and gently but firmly extracted her other hand from his suddenly tightening, clammy grip. Elara? Marcus murmured, just loud enough for her to hear, a distinct warning edge, a hint of steel, creeping into his tone. His eyes narrowed, the first flicker of unease, of dawning panic, appearing in their hazel depths. She turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze directly, her own eyes now devoid of any softness, any bridal blush. For a heart-stopping moment, she said nothing, just let him sit in the sudden, that suffocating silence, in the heavy, pulsing tension that had abruptly filled the sacred space. Let him squirm. Let him wonder. Let the first icy tendrils of fear snake around his arrogant heart. Then finally she spoke. Her voice, when it came, was not the soft whisper of a nervous bride. It was calm, clear, and carried effortlessly through the stunned cathedral, each word a perfectly polished stone dropped into a silent pool. Actually, Monsignor, she said, her gaze still locked on Marcus's, a tiny, almost imperceptible, chilling smile playing on her lips. Before I answer that, there's something I think everyone here, especially Marcus, really ought to see. Confusion, then dawning, naked panic, flickered across Marcus's handsome face. His mouth opened, then closed. But before he could utter a word, before he could attempt to regain control of the narrative he had so carefully crafted, the massive, state-of-the-art LED screen discreetly integrated into the floral arrangements behind the altar, the very screen that had, moments before, been displaying a tasteful slideshow of their happiest moments, flickered abruptly to life. At first, there was nothing but a brief burst of digital static, a fleeting moment of distorted sound that made several guests jump. Then the first image appeared, stark and undeniable, a crystal-clear, high-resolution photograph. Marcus, shirtless, lounging comfortably in a bed that was most definitely not their bed, his arm wrapped possessively around a woman whose face was turned slightly away, but whose cascade of familiar fiery red hair, Zara's signature shade, was instantly, shockingly recognizable. A woman who was very, very clearly not Elara. A collective gasp, sharp and unified, ripped through the room. Someone in the front pew, was it Marcus's aunt, the notoriously gossipy Lady Beatrice, muttered a shocked, "Oh my God." Vivian Thorne, Marcus's impeccably coiffed mother, went ashen, her hand flying to her chest as if to ward off a physical blow. Alistair Thorne, his father, turned a dangerous shade of puce, his jaw clenching so hard, Elara thought his teeth might crack. Marcus's entire body stiffened as if he'd been struck by lightning. His grip on where Elara's hand had been tightened convulsively on empty air. But she didn't flinch, didn't react, just watched him calmly. her serene expression unchanged, a silent observer at his public immolation. This was the beginning of Marcus's downfall. Another photo flashed onto the screen, then another and another, a horrifying slideshow of public exposure, each one more intimate, more damning than the last. Zara, smiling coquettishly up at Marcus, her head resting on his bare chest in what was clearly a post-coital embrace. Marcus, kissing Zara passionately against what looked like a very expensive, very anonymous hotel room door, his hand possessively tangled in her red hair. Marcus and Zara, laughing, clinking champagne glasses on a sun-drenched balcony overlooking an azure sea. A balcony, Elara recognized from a brochure for a resort Marcus had claimed he needed to visit for a solo business retreat just 2 months prior. Then came the messages. Screenshots of text exchanges, vivid and undeniable, projected large enough for everyone, even those in the furthest pews, to read the sickening, contemptuous words. The evidence was irrefutable. Marcus, can't wait to ditch the porcelain doll and have the real thing in my arms tonight. Z, she's driving me insane with all this wedding crap. Just make sure she signs that prenup first, darling. My Manolos aren't going to pay for themselves. And did you secure the loan from Elara's father yet? My shopping spree depends on it, darling. Old fool practically threw the money at me. He thinks it's for our future. Consider those shoes bought. He actually believes Elara has a head for numbers. Pathetic. You're terrible, but God, I love it. She has absolutely no clue, does she? It's almost too easy. Marcus, relax. She trusts me completely, worships me. It's pathetic, really, but useful. More gasps erupted. Whispers grew louder, morphing into a wave of shocked, outraged murmurs sweeping through the horrified crowd. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a cruel, calculated deception. A financial betrayal layered on top of the emotional wreckage. The shocked guests were no longer just surprised, they were disgusted. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, looking anywhere but at the altar, while others openly gaped at the screen, then at Marcus, their faces masks of disbelief and rapidly forming judgment. The air crackled with scandal. And then the final, devastating blow. A video file began to play. Marcus's voice, crystal clear, amplified through the cathedral's speaker system, filled the stunned silence. It was clearly a recording from his office, the conversation Elara had overheard, the one that had shattered her world. Please, his recorded voice scoffed, laced with that chilling amusement. If she ever found out, she'd shatter like a cheap porcelain doll. She practically worships the ground I walk on. Sweet, completely devoted, and best of all, utterly clueless. The perfect trophy wife. Then, the audio of him detailing his plan to get her to sign the prenup and then discard her when he got bored. The audio cut abruptly, but the damage was done. The vile words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous, an indictment that could not be unheard. The room erupted. Vivian Thorne let out a soft, strangled sob, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth, her face a mask of horror and shame. Alistair Thorne's usually impassive expression had turned to one of pure, cold disgust, his eyes boring into his son with an intensity that promised retribution. Marcus finally found his voice, or rather, a strangled, panicked version of it. He stepped forward, stumbling slightly, raw panic flickering wildly in his eyes, his carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. This is fake," he shouted, his voice louder than necessary, bordering on frantic, cracking under the strain. "It's completely fabricated, doctored. Someone is trying to set me up. Elara, darling, you can't believe this slander." Elara let out a soft, almost pitying laugh, shaking her head slowly, her calm a stark, devastating contrast to his unraveling hysteria. "Really, Marcus?" she asked, her voice still clear, still carrying, though now laced with an undisguised contempt. "After all that undeniable evidence, that's the best you've got? A desperate, pathetic lie?" The whispers intensified. People were turning to each other, murmuring in shock and disbelief. The narrative had shifted irrevocably. Marcus's desperation turned sharper, bordering on aggressive. He took another step towards her, his hands outstretched as if to plead or perhaps to silence her. "Elara, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding, a terrible, orchestrated—" "Oh, I'm not finished yet, Marcus." Elara interrupted coolly, her voice slicing through his frantic denial, commanding silence once more. She let the moment stretch, let him squirm under the weight of 1,000 accusing stares, let him feel the walls of his perfect world closing in. Then she inhaled slowly, deliberately, and delivered the words that would utterly shatter whatever shred of illusion, whatever desperate hope for damage control Marcus had desperately clung to. "Oh, and one more thing," she added, her tone almost conversational, as if discussing the weather. She let her hand drop casually to her stomach, smoothing the delicate lace of her gown over the slight, almost imperceptible curve that wasn't yet visible to the eye, but was so profoundly, irrevocably real to her. "I'm pregnant." A fresh wave of gasps, sharper this time, more personal, swept the audience. The news hit the already reeling room like a sudden, violent gust of wind, knocking the remaining air from many lungs. The pregnancy reveal was a masterstroke of timing. Marcus's body jerked as if he'd been physically struck again. His eyes widened in stunned, disbelieving horror. You're pregnant?" he stammered, his voice barely a croak, all the bluster gone, replaced by a raw, uncomprehending shock. Elara held his gaze, unflinching, her eyes like chips of ice. "Yes, Marcus, I am." For a split second, something unreadable, something akin to a desperate, grasping flicker of hope sparked in Marcus's eyes. Could this be his out, his salvation? A baby? Perhaps he thought the baby could somehow mitigate the disaster, could force a reconciliation, a papering over of the cracks. A child could change things, couldn't it? But then Elara smiled. A small, knowing, utterly devastating smile. And the final knife twisted, sharp and deep, severing the last thread of his composure. "The father," she announced, her voice light, almost casual, yet carrying to every corner of the suddenly, profoundly silent cathedral, ensuring every single shocked guest heard every single damning word, "is not you." The silence that crashed down upon St. Augustine's cathedral was heavier, more profound than any sacred hush its ancient stones had ever witnessed. Elara's final words, "The father is not you," hung in the air like a guillotine's blade, poised above Marcus Thorne's perfectly coiffed head. Every eye in that opulent, flower-drenched space was fixed on the altar, where a fairy-tale wedding had just spectacularly, irrevocably imploded. Marcus stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, slowly draining of all color, leaving him looking pale, diminished, and suddenly, shockingly, small, under the harsh glare of the spotlights that had been meant to illuminate his triumph. You could hear a diamond drop. Can you imagine the sheer, unadulterated shock? Then, from the stunned ranks of the groomsmen, the distinct scrape of a chair against the marble floor, a sound that ripped through the suffocating stillness. A figure detached himself, stepping forward with a quiet, deliberate grace that was the antithesis of Marcus's now crumbling arrogance. Rhys. His presence was a steady, calm anchor in the chaos. His dark eyes, so often guarded, now fixed on Elara with an expression of such profound, unwavering tenderness that it made her breath catch. He ignored the collective gasp that followed his movement, ignored his shell-shocked brother. He had eyes only for Elara. He stopped beside her, not touching, but his proximity a shield. And when he spoke, his voice, though not loud, was clear, strong, resonating with a quiet authority that commanded the attention of every single soul in that cathedral. "Unlike you, Marcus," Rhys said, his gaze finally briefly flicking to his brother, a look of cold, almost clinical contempt in their depths. "I will cherish her, and I will cherish our child." Rhys's public declaration of paternity and love was a second bombshell, detonating in the already reeling silence. Marcus staggered back a step as if he'd been physically struck. His face, moments before pale with shock, now flushed a blotchy, furious red. His hands, those hands that had so confidently held Elara's, curled into tight, white-knuckled fists at his sides. "You're lying," he choked out, spitting the words, his voice a raw, incredulous snarl. "She's lying. This is insane." Elara didn't even blink. She simply held his gaze, her own calm a terrifying counterpoint to his unraveling fury. "Am I, Marcus?" her eyes seemed to say. "Are you so sure?" Before Rhys could respond, Marcus, with a guttural roar of pure, unadulterated narcissistic rage, lunged. It wasn't a calculated move, it was the desperate, reckless act of a cornered animal, fueled by wounded pride and the blinding fury of a man whose entire world, whose entire sense of self, was being publicly dismantled before his very eyes. His hands reached for Rhys, fingers clawed, as if he intended to rip him apart with sheer brute force alone. But Rhys, Though slighter in build than his older brother, possessed a quiet, wiry strength and an artist's fluid grace. He'd clearly anticipated the attack. In a single, smooth, economical motion, he sidestepped Marcus's clumsy lunge, caught his flailing wrist, and twisted sharply, using Marcus's own momentum against him. Marcus let out a sharp grunt of pain and surprise as Rhys expertly wrenched his arm, sending him stumbling off balance. His knee buckled, and before Marcus could even attempt to catch himself, Rhys delivered a swift, controlled shove directly to his chest. It wasn't a punch, not an act of aggression, but a decisive, almost regretful act of containment. Marcus went crashing backward, his expensively clad body hitting the polished marble floor with a sickening thud that echoed jarringly through the vast, suddenly re-silenced cathedral. Gasps, sharper this time, rang out. Someone, possibly his mother, let out a muffled shriek. The sound of Marcus Thorne, the master of the universe, hitting the unforgiving stone was sharp, brutal, and undeniably final. The Emperor had no clothes, and now he was on his backside. Rhys didn't even flinch. He simply stood over his fallen brother, his jaw tight, his eyes steady and cold, not with malice, but with a profound, weary disappointment. "Sit down, Marcus," he said coolly, his voice cutting through the shocked silence, each word precise and dismissive. "You've embarrassed yourself and this family, enough for one day." Marcus groaned, rolling onto his side, his face burning with a mixture of pain and utter, soul-searing public humiliation. He tried to push himself up, but his limbs felt strangely weak, his custom tuxedo now rumpled and stained with ignominy. His pride, that monumental, unshakable edifice, lay shattered beneath the crushing weight of hundreds of pairs of eyes. Eyes that now held not admiration, but a mixture of pity, disgust, and a certain horrified fascination. Then another voice, colder than the marble floor, sharper than any shard of broken glass, cut through the air like a whip crack. "Enough." Marcus froze, slowly, painfully, turning his head toward the sound. Alistair Thorne, his father, always so composed, so impeccably in control, the patriarch of the Thorne dynasty, was staring down at him from the front pew. His face was a mask of glacial fury, an expression Marcus had never in his entire privileged life seen directed at him before. Not disappointment, not even simple anger, something far worse, utter, profound, and irrevocable disgust. The kind a king might bestow upon a traitor. "You have shamed this family enough, Marcus," Alistair stated, his voice low, dangerously even, each word landing like a physical blow, precise and devastating. "Your appetites, your recklessness, I have tolerated for too long, but this public spectacle, this filth, I will not allow you to carry the Thorne name after this display. You are no son of mine." Marcus's disownment, public, brutal, final. The words landed with the brutal finality of a death sentence. The room, already thick with tension, seemed to physically shrink around them. Marcus's breath stuttered, his vision blurring at the edges. He shook his head quickly, scrambling unsteadily to his feet, his hands shaking. "No, no, Dad. You don't mean that. You can't." Alistair Thorne's glacial expression didn't change. His eyes were like chips of ice. "Get out," he commanded, his voice soft but carrying the unyielding weight of absolute authority. "Now, before you disgrace us further." He made a curt gesture, and two burly security guards, discreetly positioned near the cathedral entrance, began to move purposefully towards Marcus. Marcus felt his meticulously constructed world collapsing in on him, suffocating him. His father had always backed him, always defended him, no matter the cost, no matter how ruthless his business dealings or questionable his personal choices. The Thorne name, the Thorne power, had always been his shield, his birthright. But now he was being cast aside, disowned like common refuse. His mother, Vivienne, had turned her face away, unable to even look at him, her shoulders shaking with silent, heartbroken sobs. His key business associates, the ones he'd been cultivating, the ones whose respect he craved, were already discreetly checking their phones, their expressions carefully neutral, no doubt sending out urgent messages, severing ties, distancing themselves from the unfolding, radioactive scandal before the fallout spread further and tainted them all. He felt physically sick, a knot of ice and fire in his gut. The family drama was playing out for all to see, and he was the villain, the outcast. Then, movement flickered in the corner of his eye. Zara. She was inching stealthily toward a side aisle, clutching her small, beaded evening purse tightly to her chest, her usually vibrant red hair looking almost garish in the somber light, her eyes wide with panic, darting around like a trapped animal. She was attempting to slip away unnoticed amidst the chaos, to melt into the shadows before the full force of the scandal consumed her too. Can you blame her? What would you do? But she wasn't going to be that lucky. Not today. A sharp, imperious voice rang out, dripping with accusation. It was Lady Beatrice Thorne, Marcus's formidable great-aunt, a woman whose disapproval could wither fortunes. "And just where do you think you're going, you little home-wrecking Jezebel?" Her voice, amplified by the cathedral's acoustics, was like a trumpet call to judgment. Zara froze mid-step, her face paling dramatically under the sudden, unwelcome scrutiny of hundreds of eyes. She looked like a startled deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. I need some air," she stammered weakly, her voice barely a squeak. Another guest nearby, a rival society hostess Zara had often tried to upstage, let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, honey, I think you need a miracle, or perhaps a very good lawyer." A ripple of cold, malicious amusement, quickly suppressed but undeniably present, spread through a certain segment of the assembled crowd. Elara watched, a strange detachment settling over her as the full weight of realization crashed down onto Zara's panicked features. Zara had spent years carefully cultivating her image, the loyal best friend, the supportive confidant, the woman who was always there for Elara. But now, in the harsh, unforgiving glare of public exposure, all anyone saw was a liar, a backstabber, a homewrecker. The scarlet letter, invisible but potent, was branding itself upon her. Zara's desperate, tear-filled eyes darted frantically to Elara, a silent, pleading appeal. "Do something. Say something. Help me." But Elara just tilted her head slightly, her expression calm, unreadable, offering no lifeline, no quarter. She had given Zara her trust, her friendship, her sisterly love, and Zara had trampled it all underfoot for a sordid affair with the very man Elara was to marry. There would be no mercy from this queen. Zara's lips parted, as if she wanted to plead, to explain, to somehow justify her heinous actions. But what could she possibly say? That she hadn't meant to betray her best friend? That she hadn't planned on sleeping with Elara's fiancé? That it had all just happened? The excuses, even if uttered, would have been pathetic, insulting. Elara didn't care for them. And clearly, judging by the hostile stares and disgusted murmurs, neither did anyone else in that room. Before Zara could utter a single self-serving word, another guest, a prominent philanthropist whose charity Elara had tirelessly supported, muttered, loud enough for many to hear, "Disgusting." Then another, a stern-faced dowager with impeccable lineage, added, her voice ringing with aristocratic disdain, "Have you no shame, girl? No decency?" The whispers grew louder, swirling around Zara like angry hornets, thick with judgment and contempt. Zara's disgrace was absolute. Her breath came out in shaky, uneven gasps. She turned desperately toward Marcus, as if he were somehow still her anchor, her lifeline, the one person in this room of condemning faces who would surely take her side, defend her. But Marcus wasn't even looking at her. He was still frozen in place near the altar, his shoulders slumped, his face blank, utterly consumed by his own public implosion, the security guards now flanking him. Zara swallowed hard, the brutal final realization hitting her like a physical slap. He wasn't going to defend her. The man she had risked everything for, her reputation, her friendships, what little integrity she might have possessed, wasn't going to risk a single thing for her in return. Marcus was already thinking only about himself, about damage control, about survival, and she was just collateral damage, an inconvenient loose end easily discarded. Another broken toy. Zara let out a small, choked sob, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair, before quickly turning on her heel. She didn't walk, she practically fled, shoving roughly past the stunned onlookers, her expensive designer dress catching on a pew, a small tearing sound that seemed to symbolize her own tattered reputation. She disappeared hastily through a heavy side door, vanishing into the indifferent city beyond. No one tried to stop her, no one cared enough to, and just like that, she was gone. Marcus Thorne stood alone, truly alone, amidst the wreckage of his own making. The full, crushing weight of it all, the public humiliation, the Marcus's disownment, the loss of respect, the evaporation of his power, finally seemed to settle onto his shoulders. His family's unwavering support and influence, gone. His reputation, his future, all gone, incinerated in a matter of minutes by the woman he had so arrogantly dismissed as a naive porcelain doll. The irony was almost too perfect. And Elara. She was still standing tall at the altar, her veil slightly askew from the earlier chaos, her bouquet of ivory roses still clutched loosely in her hands, looking regal, composed and utterly, terrifyingly untouchable, a queen surveying the ruins of a fallen tyrant's kingdom. Marcus finally forced himself to look directly at her. His eyes, those once arrogant, confident eyes, now filled with something broken, something desperate, something almost pleading. "Elara," he started, his voice rough, hoarse, a pathetic shadow of its former commanding tone. She simply smiled at him. Not cruelly, not mockingly, not even triumphantly, just a small, final, dismissive smile, as if he were a stranger. As if she had already moved on, as if he were already a forgotten footnote in the epic saga of her past. He felt something vital inside him, the very core of his being, crumble into dust. The silence that followed was different now. Not the sharp, stunned silence that had first filled the cathedral when Marcus's betrayal was exposed, but a heavy, awkward, uncertain silence. The priest, Monsignor Davies, stood awkwardly near the altar, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, clearing his throat repeatedly, his eyes flicking nervously between Elara, still resplendent in her wedding gown, and Marcus, who remained frozen in place as the security guards gently but firmly began to escort him towards the side aisle his father had gestured to. The murmurs in the audience had mostly died down, but the weight of 1,000 unsaid judgments, 1,000 re-evaluated opinions, still hung thick and heavy in the air. It was a family drama for the ages, and the justice had been swift and brutal. Then finally, after Marcus had been quietly removed, a broken, humiliated shell of a man, Monsignor Davies spoke again, his voice hesitant, uncertain, clearly beyond any seminary training he'd ever received. Do we continue with this wedding ceremony?" he stammered, his bewildered gaze fixed on Elara. "What does one do in such an unprecedented situation? Is there a protocol for a bride who has just systematically destroyed her groom and then revealed another man as the father of her child? Probably not." Elara let out a soft breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The climax was over, the revenge enacted. But there was still one thing left, one loose end, one possibility. She turned slightly, her gaze finding Rhys instantly among the stunned groomsmen. He hadn't moved since his confrontation with Marcus, hadn't spoken again, but his presence remained a solid, unwavering anchor in the turbulent room. His hands were shoved casually into the pockets of his tuxedo trousers now, his jaw still tight, but his intense dark eyes were locked onto hers with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Hope? Fear? Resignation? Then, as if making a profound, life-altering decision in real time, he took a deliberate step forward. And then another. Elara's heart, which had been pounding a frantic rhythm of adrenaline and triumph, now stuttered, a wild, unexpected, love-fueled beat against her ribs. The air between them shifted again, crackling with something unspoken, something potent, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for far longer than either of them had dared to acknowledge. Rhys didn't stop until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him, to smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne, so different from Marcus's overpowering, expensive musk. He looked down at her for a long, charged moment, his expression unreadable, as if he were searching for something specific, something vital, deep within her eyes. Then, to the audible, collective shock of everyone remaining in St. Augustine's Cathedral, Rhys Thorne, the quiet artist, the overlooked brother, dropped smoothly to one knee on the cold, unforgiving marble floor. Another collective gasp rippled through the stunned crowd, louder this time, tinged with disbelief and a dawning, incredulous wonder. Elara's own breath caught sharply in her throat, her eyes widening, her hand instinctively going to the locket at her neck. Could this be happening? Now? After everything? Rhys reached for her hand, the one not holding the slightly crushed bouquet of ivory roses. His grip was warm, steady, grounding. He produced no ostentatious diamond, no family heirloom crusted with jewels. Instead, from a small worn velvet pouch he pulled from his pocket, he revealed a simple, exquisitely handcrafted silver ring, a single, luminous moonstone nestled in its center, glowing with a soft internal light. It was beautiful, unique, true. Something he might have made himself. He looked up at her, his dark eyes now blazing with a fierce, vulnerable sincerity that stole her breath away. Marry me instead, Elara. Rhys's proposal was a clear, strong statement, yet intensely personal, his voice resonating with a depth of emotion that Marcus, with all his practiced charm, could never have hoped to emulate. It wasn't a question born of pity or obligation, not a desperate move in a chaotic situation. It was, she realized with a jolt that went straight to her core, a promise, a declaration, an offer of a different future, a truer path, built not on lies and deception, but on something real, something possible. Rhys, she whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with 1,000 unshed tears, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, shock, gratitude, fear, and a fragile, burgeoning hope. His thumb brushed gently over her knuckles, a slow, deliberate, reassuring touch. I know this isn't exactly how things were supposed to happen, Elara, he said, his voice low, quiet enough that only she could truly hear him amidst the renewed buzz of astonished whispers from the pews. And I know you probably weren't expecting this. None of this. Lord knows, I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage. A faint, self-deprecating smile touched his lips. But Elara, you deserve so much more than what Marcus ever could have given you. You deserve honesty. You deserve loyalty. You deserve someone who will actually stand by you, not just stand beside you for show. Someone who won't betray you. Someone who will love you, truly love you, the way you deserve to be loved, for who you are, not for what you represent. Elara felt her throat tighten. Tears, different tears this time, pricking at the corners of her eyes. These weren't tears of pain or rage, but of something complex and overwhelming and, surprisingly warm. Rhys's hand squeezed hers gently, grounding her in the surreal, unbelievable moment. I won't hurt you like he did, Elara, he continued earnestly, his gaze unwavering, a solemn vow in their depths. I won't lie to you. I won't use you. I will spend every single day from here on out proving to you that you're not a prize to be won or a doll to be discarded, but a woman to be cherished, respected, and adored. With our child. Her vision blurred slightly. She had spent so much time recently feeling like a fool, feeling used, discarded, broken. She had spent sleepless nights wondering if she had ever truly been loved at all. If genuine love, the kind she'd read about in books but never truly experienced, even existed. But standing here now, looking down at Rhys, the man who had stood by her side, believed in her, helped her navigate the darkest, most treacherous moments of her life, she realized something profound. He had always seen her. Not as Marcus Thorne's fiancé, not as a society accessory, not as a trophy or a pawn, but just her. Elara. Her lips parted slightly, her heart pounding a frantic, hopeful rhythm against her ribs. She was on the precipice of another decision, one that felt infinitely more significant, more terrifyingly real than the one she had faced just moments before. Before she could form a single word, a bitter, broken voice, laced with pure, venomous disbelief, cut sharply through the charged silence. Marcus, though being led away, had apparently paused at the aisle's edge, his face contorted. You have got to be kidding me? Rhys, you think this sideshow changes anything? You think she'll actually? Rhys didn't even glance at him. His eyes remained locked steadfastly onto Elara's, his focus absolute, as if Marcus Thorne, the fallen tyrant, didn't even exist anymore. As if nothing else in that vast, crowded cathedral mattered but her answer. And in that moment, Elara felt something fundamental shift deep inside her. For so long, leading up to this public reckoning, she had been focused solely on revenge, on the destruction of Marcus's world, on looking for closure, anticipating some grand, victorious moment where she would finally feel like she had won. But looking at Marcus now, a broken, raving caricature of his former self, and then looking at Rhys, kneeling before her, his heart in his eyes, offering not just escape, but a genuine, tangible future. She didn't need that feeling of victory anymore. Because Marcus had already lost. Completely. Utterly. And she had found something infinitely more precious. She squeezed Rhys's hand back, steadying herself, drawing strength from his solid, unwavering presence. And then, without hesitating, without a single backward glance at the life that was now irrevocably in her past, she nodded. A slow, deliberate movement. A single, teary, radiant smile broke through. Yes, she breathed, the word a soft promise in the echoing silence. Yes, Rhys, yes. The cathedral erupted. gasps, shouts, excited, disbelieving murmurs, a cacophony of noise sweeping through the crowd like wildfire. Riss's lips parted slightly, a look of stunned, almost disbelieving joy washing over his features, as if he hadn't actually expected her to say it. Not right then, not right there, amidst the ruins of another man's wedding. But then his face broke into a slow, breathtaking smile, the kind of genuine, unguarded, soul-deep smile she had never once seen on Marcus's face. The kind of smile that radiated warmth and sincerity. The kind of smile that truly meant something. He stood up gracefully, his grip still firm, reassuring on her hand, his presence beside her, feeling suddenly, undeniably, miraculously right. He slipped the beautiful, simple silver moonstone ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Monsignor Davies, who had clearly never encountered anything remotely like this in his entire clerical career, looked utterly flustered, his face a comical mixture of shock and bewilderment. He cleared his throat again, his gaze darting between the radiant couple before him and the rapidly emptying pews as many guests, overwhelmed or scandalized, began to make their escape. Well then, in that rather unconventional case, shall we continue with a new wedding? Elara exhaled softly, a laugh bubbling up, light and free. She turned back toward the altar, toward the bewildered priest. A sense of profound peace, of unexpected, astonishing justice, settling over her amidst the lingering chaos. She glanced briefly down the aisle, taking in the sea of stunned faces, the gaping remaining guests, the sharp gleam of 100 smartphones held aloft, recording every second of this unbelievable, viral moment for posterity. Then she turned back to Riss, met his warm, steady, adoring gaze, and smiled. A real, genuine, utterly joyful smile this time. The rise of a queen, indeed. "Yes, Monseigneur," she said again, her voice stronger now, filled with a newfound certainty, a dazzling, unshakable hope. "Let's continue." And so, as the last echoes of the initial uproar faded into a stunned, almost reverent hush within the hallowed walls of St. Augustine's Cathedral, Monsignor Davies, his face a comical tableau of bewilderment and a dawning, reluctant admiration for the sheer audacity of it all, straightened his slightly askew stole. He cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to reverberate in the suddenly cavernous space, and looked from Elara's radiant, tear-streaked but undeniably triumphant face to Rhys's steady protective form beside her. "Well then, he stammered, a man clearly operating far outside the established liturgical playbook, in these rather unique, and I must say, unprecedented circumstances. Shall we proceed to wedding?" The vows they exchanged moments later, standing before that same grand altar which had so recently been a stage for such brutal public exposure and righteous revenge, were not the elaborate, carefully scripted pronouncements originally intended for Marcus Thorne. No. These were different, rawer, truer, forged in the fires of an almost unbearable betrayal and tempered by an unexpected, resilient, and astonishingly brave love. Elara's voice, though soft, held a new, unshakable strength as she pledged her heart to Rhys, her eyes locked on his, seeing in their dark, devoted depths a promise of safety, honesty, and a love she was only just beginning to comprehend. And Rhys, his own voice thick with an emotion that made more than a few of the remaining, utterly gobsmacked guests reach for their already damp handkerchiefs, spoke of cherishing Elara, of honoring her spirit, of protecting her and their child with every fiber of his being. He slid the simple, handcrafted silver moonstone ring, his own creation, a symbol of pure, untainted hope, onto her finger. It fit as if it had always been destined to be there. When Monsignor Davies, with a shaky but genuine smile, finally uttered the words, "By the power vested in me, you may now kiss the bride," the cathedral, or what remained of its congregation, seemed to hold its collective breath. Rhys didn't hesitate. He cupped Elara's face gently between his hands, his thumbs stroking softly across her cheekbones, wiping away the last vestiges of her tears. His touch was warm, respectful, a stark, healing contrast to the cold, calculated possessiveness Marcus had once shown her. He looked into her eyes, a silent question, a final offering of choice. And Elara, her heart swelling with a feeling so profound, so overwhelming it threatened to consume her, leaned in. Their first kiss, as husband and wife, was not the performative, society-approved peck that would have sealed her fate with Marcus. This was different. This was a promise kept. A silent vow that went deeper than mere words. It was gentle yet firm, deep yet achingly patient, filled with a quiet intensity that spoke of shared battles, unspoken understanding, and a future they would now face, astonishingly, together. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Elara wasn't thinking about the painful past, about Marcus's isolation in his self-made hell, about betrayal, about heartbreak, about the wreckage she had so necessarily wrought. She was thinking only about this moment, right here, right now. About the comforting, solid way Riss's hands held her, as if she were something infinitely precious. About the quiet, unwavering true love that radiated from him, a steady, warm light in the encroaching darkness. It was a moment of profound, unexpected peace, a new beginning, unfurling amidst the ashes of the old. The reception, naturally, was not the grand, ostentatious affair Marcus had meticulously planned at the city's most exclusive ballroom. That monument to his ego had been summarily cancelled, the deposits forfeited, another casualty of his spectacular downfall. Instead, Rhys, with the quiet efficiency Elara was coming to adore, had arranged for a smaller, more intimate gathering in the walled gardens of a historic Viridia hotel, a place of understated elegance and quiet charm. As twilight descended, casting a soft, pearlescent glow over the ancient oak trees draped with twinkling fairy lights, the atmosphere transformed from the raw scandal of the cathedral to something unique, poignant, and almost magical. Laughter, genuine and heartfelt this time, mingled with the soft strains of a jazz trio that Rhys had somehow conjured on short notice. Champagne glasses clinked, not in a display of societal power, but in celebration of something far more authentic. Many of the original 500 guests, the ones who had come to see and be seen, had, of course, fled the scene of Marcus's social execution, as if escaping a plague. Good riddance. The ones who remained, a motley crew of Elara's true friends, Rhys's supportive, if somewhat bewildered, artistic circle, a few genuinely decent Thorne family relations who had always harbored private reservations about Marcus, and a surprising number of captivated strangers who had simply been too fascinated by the unfolding family drama to leave, now looked at Elara and Rhys with a mixture of genuine admiration, stunned respect, and a warmth that was utterly, refreshingly real. What a story they'd have to tell. Elara, her magnificent wedding gown now feeling less like a costume for a tragic opera and more like a symbol of her own defiant resilience, moved through the garden, her hand tucked securely in Riss's arm. She felt light, free, as if a tremendous, crushing weight had been lifted from her soul. She caught snippets of conversation, hushed whispers about Marcus's complete social and financial ruin. Rumors were already flying. Alistair Thorne, true to his word, was initiating proceedings to remove Marcus from the board of Thorne Industries. The loan Marcus had so cleverly secured from Elara's father was now under intense scrutiny, with whispers of fraud and potential legal repercussions. Marcus Thorne, the golden boy, the tyrant, was now a ghost at this feast, his name a toxic whisper, his future a desolate landscape of his own making. Marcus's isolation was complete, swift, and brutal. And you know what? Elara felt not a shred of pity, only a profound, cleansing relief. Later, as the celebration began to wind down, Elara and Rhys found themselves on a quiet, stone balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens, the scent of night-blooming jasmine perfuming the air. The city of Viridia glittered below, a million indifferent stars in a concrete sky. Elara rested her head against Rhys's solid shoulder, the steady rhythm of his breathing a comforting counterpoint to the soft music drifting up from below. The silver moonstone ring on her finger felt cool, solid, real. "How long, Rhys?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, lost in the soft night air. Rhys turned his head, his dark hair brushing her temple. He raised a questioning eyebrow, his eyes, even in the dim light, full of that familiar, gentle intensity. "How long would Elara?" She took a breath, the scent of jasmine and Rhys filling her senses. "How long have you felt this way?" It was a terrifying question to ask, a vulnerable admission of her own dawning, bewildering true love. Rhys didn't hesitate, didn't even seem to need to think about it. His answer was immediate, matter of fact, yet imbued with a tenderness that made her heart ache in a way that was entirely new, entirely wonderful. "Since the first time you actually laughed at one of my terrible jokes, Elara." A soft smile touched his lips. "Probably back when Marcus first brought you home to meet the family. You were trying so hard to be polite to everyone, so composed, and then I said something utterly ridiculous about my mother's prize-winning poodle resembling a disgruntled cloud, and you just burst out laughing. A real laugh, not the polite society titter. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Elara let out an amused little puff of air, a genuine smile gracing her own lips. Rhys, you always make terrible jokes. It was true. His humor was quirky, often absurd, a stark contrast to Marcus's polished, predictable wit. Exactly, he said, his grin widening, that devastatingly charming, easy grin that reached his eyes and made her feel seen, truly seen. And you're still the only one who ever consistently laughed at them. With genuine amusement, not just Thorn family obligation. He dipped his head slightly, his gaze searching hers. I used to test them out on Marcus first sometimes, just to gauge the level of cringe, see if I even had a shot at making you smile. He'd usually just give me that deadpan stare of his and say something cutting like, "Rhys, is this why father still questions your contributions to the company portfolio?" Elara laughed, the sound light, free, and completely genuine this time. So different from the brittle, forced laughter she'd deployed with Marcus. "Yeah," she said, a warmth spreading through her chest, chasing away the last lingering shadows of the day's trauma. "That definitely sounds like Marcus." Rhys's smile softened, his fingers tracing slow, lazy circles on her bare arm where her shawl had slipped, sending pleasant, unexpected shivers down her spine. "You want to know something else, Elara?" "What?" she whispered, her voice suddenly husky. "You made it really, really hard for me to hate him sometimes," he admitted, his tone turning serious again. Vulnerable. Elara arched an eyebrow, pulling back slightly to look him in the eye, the city lights reflected in their depths. "Hate him?" Rhys nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yeah. Because you were always so damn loyal to him, Elara. Always defending him, making excuses for his shortcomings, always looking at him like he hung the moon and stars, like he was the best, most brilliant thing in the world." His voice held a trace of old frustration, a shadow of the pain he must have endured, watching her love a man so unworthy of it. "It was incredibly frustrating to watch, knowing what I knew, what I suspected, seeing how he took you, your light, your incredible spirit, completely for granted." Elara swallowed, her throat suddenly tight. "Why, Rhys? Why did you never?" Rhys said softly, his voice a gentle caress, as he gently brushed a stray curl back from her face, his knuckles grazing her cheek, a touch that sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity through her. "Because all that time, Elara, all those years, I wanted to be the one you looked at like that. But I never thought, I never imagined." Her breath caught. For a long moment she couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything, but let the weight and significance of those quietly spoken, earth-shattering words settle over her, sinking deep into her heart, into her very soul. He, Rhys, this quiet, steadfast, honorable man, had loved her. All along. While she had been blinded by Marcus's superficial dazzle, Rhys had seen her. He must have noticed her stillness, her shock, because his serious expression softened into something else, something deeper, something patient, something incredibly tender. He let the silence stretch between them, a silence no longer filled with tension or fear, but with a fragile, burgeoning understanding, cocooning them on that moonlit balcony, giving her the time and space she needed to process what he had just admitted, what he had clearly felt for a very, very long time. And Elara, she didn't need much time. She already knew. Maybe she had been blind before. Willfully ignorant, perhaps, caught in the undertow of Marcus's charisma and the societal expectations that came with being a Thorn fiancé. But now she saw everything with a blinding, painful, yet ultimately liberating clarity. The quiet glances, the shared, exasperated eye rolls at Marcus's more egregious pronouncements. The way Rhys always seemed to be there, a steady, unobtrusive presence, when she was feeling overwhelmed by the Thorn family's suffocating opulence, or Marcus's casual neglect. It all clicked into place, forming a new, breathtaking mosaic. She exhaled slowly, tilting her head up to meet his warm, steady, hopeful gaze. "You don't have to wish for that anymore, Rhys," she said softly, but with an utter, unshakable conviction that came from a place deep within her, a place newly awakened, a place of empowerment and burgeoning true love. Rhys stilled completely, his eyes searching hers, a silent question hanging in the air. And then, ever so slowly, that breathtaking, soul-stirring smile spread across his face again, lighting him up from the inside out, chasing away the last vestiges of the night's shadows. "Yeah?" he murmured, his voice husky with an emotion so profound it made her own heart ache with a sweet, unfamiliar joy. Elara nodded, her fingers curling confidently around the lapel of his tuxedo jacket, pulling him just a fraction closer. "Yeah." Rhys let out a soft, relieved breath, his forehead pressing lightly against hers again, a silent communion passing between them, a promise of new beginnings under the watchful eyes of the city. "Guess I finally told a joke worth laughing at," he whispered against her skin, his breath warm and inviting. Elara laughed softly, shaking her head, her heart feeling impossibly, wonderfully full. "Shut up," she whispered back, her voice filled with a lightness, a joy, a burgeoning hopeful future she hadn't dared to feel in what seemed like a lifetime. "Shut up and dance with your wife, Rhys Thorne." And as he twirled her gently under the soft glow of the fairy lights, as her genuine laughter finally, truly mixed with his, as they swayed together, perfectly in sync, in a world that was suddenly, unexpectedly, and completely, irrevocably theirs, Elara knew. Marcus had called her a porcelain doll, fragile and easily broken, a thing to be displayed and then discarded. But as she looked into Rhys's eyes, his love a steady, unwavering flame, she knew, with every fiber of her reborn being, that she was forged from something far stronger, something far more resilient. For in the ashes of one life, a life built on lies and deception, another, truer, brighter, and infinitely more precious, had just begun to burn with an incandescent, healing light. Her journey had been a descent into hell, but somehow, against all odds, she had emerged, not unscathed, but empowered, holding the hand of an unexpected love, ready to write a future that was entirely gloriously her own. Sometimes strength isn't born in the light, it's forged in the dark. Elara's story is a profound reminder that betrayal, no matter how devastating, doesn't define us, it reveals us. She could have shattered under the weight of deceit, a woman betrayed by the man she trusted and the friend she cherished. But instead of running, she stood tall. She transformed pain into power, humiliation into resilience, and heartbreak into a calculated reckoning. Her decision to face the truth head-on and dismantle the very lie she was forced to live is a lesson in self-worth and courage. In life, we may find ourselves blindsided by betrayal or buried beneath the weight of false expectations. But what we do next, how we reclaim our voice and write our own ending, is what truly defines us. You are not what others plan for you, whisper about you, or take from you. You are what you choose to rise and fight for. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after being broken, or if you believe in the quiet, unstoppable strength within us all, don't just scroll by. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories that remind us all, you can be bruised and still be brilliant, betrayed and still be bold. Elara's story isn't just a drama, it's a declaration. We rise.